Sherko, the Lunar Pallas Cat. Sherko is no ordinary Pallas cat. He lives in the snowy mountains, where the nights are especially long and starry, and life is both challenging and full of wonder. His thick, silvery grey fur shimmers with a moonlit glow in the dark, earning him the nickname, the Lunar Pallas Cat. Wise, curious, and a little shy, Sherko deeply loves his family and friends. Every full moon, he sets out on journeys through the mountains to help others. Perhaps someone has lost their way or is feeling lonely. Sherko has a sharp sense of smell, not only for food or danger, but also for emotions like joy and sadness. Sherko carries a small stone that resembles a star, which helps him find the right path and make good decisions, even in the toughest situations. The stone begins to glow whenever Sherko imagines a kind and noble solution. On his adventures, Sherko meets all kinds of animals and teaches them important lessons about friendship, kindness, and courage. In one story, he helps a young rabbit find its mother during a snowstorm. And in another, he rescues a fallen chick from a tree. Sherko inspires everyone he meets to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, to believe in the power of kind actions, and to cherish the beauty of nature. Sherko, the curious little Sherko, the moonlit Pallas cat, was a restless soul. From the moment he opened his eyes each morning, he would bombard his parents with questions. Why do stars only shine at night? Where does the snow go when it melts? How far away is the tallest peak from here? Sherko's parents patiently answered as best as they could, but sometimes they simply didn't know. After all, they were simple Pallas cats, preoccupied with the daily life of the forest. This made little Sherko quite upset. "Why don't you know?" he would complain. "How will I ever learn everything if no one can explain it to me?" Sherko felt the vastness of the world pressing in on him, urging him to see everything, understand it all, and never waste a moment. One evening, an old raven named Karak, a wise and steady friend of the family, flew down to visit. He noticed Sherko looking troubled and asked, "What's on your mind, my silvery little friend?" Sherko poured his heart out. "I want to know everything and see everything, but it feels like there's never enough time, and the grown-ups don't explain things properly." Karak's eyes twinkled with a knowing smile, as only a raven's eyes can. With a gentle flutter of his black wings, he said, "Ah, Sherko, my dear friend, you still have your whole life ahead of you. Let me tell you a story. When I was young, I wanted to know everything too. I dreamed of seeing all the forests, all the seas, and all the mountains. One day, I decided to embark on the grandest journey past the highest mountain pass in search of wisdom and the secrets of the world. But no matter how much I learned or saw, there was always something new just beyond my reach. The more I discovered, the more the boundaries of knowledge expanded, endlessly. In trying to fit everything into my mind, I found myself forgetting where I came from and where my home was. When I tried to think about it all at once, I lost touch with the present moment, missing the beauty of each second. It was as if knowing everything became more important than living itself. That's when I realized I couldn't be everywhere at once or know everything all at once. Life is like a forest path. We walk it step by step, steadily and gradually, learning only as much as we're ready to understand and carry in our mind's little closet of knowledge. Sherko listened intently as Karak continued. You don't need to know everything right now. You'll learn exactly what you need, exactly when the time is right. And you'll always end up in the place you're meant to be. The key is not to rush. Walking your path is already a great adventure. Often, the most important answers come not when you ask, but when you look within and find truths too deep for words. Sherko thought for a moment. He imagined a long forest trail, full of wonders, new friends, and unexpected turns, waiting to be discovered one step at a time. He smiled. You're right, Karak. I've been rushing too much. Why bother knowing how far away the tallest mountain is if I'm not ready to climb it yet? So I should just walk and enjoy the journey. And if I watch the snow closely, I might figure out where it goes in spring on my own. Karak nodded with approval. Exactly, little one. Cast your questions to the wind, and the wind will bring you the answers when the time is right. From that day on, Sherko stopped worrying. He relished each day, knowing that many mysteries and discoveries awaited him in the future. After all, life wasn't a race for knowledge. It was a path full of wonders. But of course, Sherko never stopped asking questions. Sherko and his first encounter with a predator. In the distant mountains, where the light of the full moon silvered the snow, little Sherko, the moonlit Pallas cat, ventured out alone for the first time. His silvery fur blended with the night shadows, and he felt like a brave explorer. But suddenly, around the edge of a rocky cliff, he saw a pair of yellow eyes gleaming in the darkness. It was a red fox, silently stalking him. Sherko froze, his heart beating faster. Who are you? Sherko asked, though he already knew the answer. The fox bared its sharp teeth, licking its lips. Someone who hasn't eaten in a while. And you look like a tasty dinner. Sherko stepped back, unsure of what to do, while the fox crouched, ready to pounce. Just then, a loud caw echoed from the treetop above. It was Karak, the old raven and a friend of Sherko's family. He swooped down swiftly, spreading his large black wings. Startled, the fox jumped back and disappeared into the shadows. Thank you, Karak, Sherko said, trembling with fear. He wanted to eat me. How cruel he is. Karak chuckled and perched beside Sherko. Cruel? He asked. Sherko, you're mistaken. The fox isn't cruel. He's just trying to survive. He might have fox cubs to feed. He hunts because he's hungry. That's how the world works. But it's so scary, Sherko said. He could have eaten me. Karak nodded. Yes, that's true. You must understand. Predators aren't evil, but they are dangerous. You live in a world where every creature fights for its place. That's why you need to grow and learn. You have a gift, your magical sense of smell. It can help you sense danger in advance. If you had been more attentive, you would have already noticed the fox's scent and realized you were in his hunting grounds. How can I develop it? Sherko asked. Start small, Karak replied. Close your eyes and listen. Feel the wind. Sniff every breeze. Time and practice will make you more aware and teach you to avoid danger without fearing it. Sherko closed his eyes. He felt the coolness of the wind, heard the rustling of leaves, and caught the faint trace of the fox's scent lingering in the air. For the first time, he realized the world around him was full of clues that could be sensed with enough attention. Thank you, Karak, Sherko said. I'm not afraid anymore, but I'll be more careful now. From that day on, Sherko not only honed his magical sense of smell, but also learned to see the world with understanding. He came to realize that everything in life is connected, dangers and lessons alike, each shaping him to be stronger. Sherko and the wisdom of the stream. Sherko, the moonlit palace's cat, was still a young adolescent. His silvery fur glistened in the moonlight, but his eyes often reflected exhaustion. Every day, he pushed himself to do more, to become stronger and smarter, striving to achieve his goals, to be the fastest, the most observant, and the wisest palace's cat in the mountains. Yet, the harder he worked, the more tired he felt, and his dreams seemed further away than ever. One evening, Sherko sat by a stream, dipping his tired paws into the cool water. He watched the currents flow around the rocks and felt a bitterness in his heart. Just then, his friend, Forest Mouse, approached him. She noticed his downcast expression and asked, "What's wrong, Sherko?" Sherko sighed. "I'm doing my best, but I still can't reach my goals. I dream of being the best, but it feels like I'll never get there. Maybe I'm just not good enough." Mouse sat beside him, pressing her tiny nose against his paw and said, "You're looking at your journey the wrong way, Sherko. Let me tell you something important. Have you ever watched how a river flows?" Mouse asked. Sherko nodded. "It always moves forward, unhurried," Mouse continued. "The river doesn't try to reach the ocean all at once. It knows its journey is long and enjoys every twist and turn, every cascade and ripple. It caresses the shores, plays with the stones, and gives life to everything around it. And eventually, it arrives exactly where it's meant to be." Sherko pondered this. "Are you saying I should just wait?" "No," Mouse said with a gentle smile. "Dreaming and wanting are important. But if you try to have everything at once, what will be left for tomorrow? Imagine if you achieved everything in a single day. Wouldn't life become boring afterward? The gradual unfolding of your dreams is a gift. It's what makes life exciting." She went on. "Don't resist the flow of life. Remember your goals and work towards them. But stay part of the stream. Let life guide you. Each day will bring something new. And one day, you'll look back and realize you've achieved far more than you ever imagined at the start of your journey." Sherko looked at the stream flowing in front of him. He listened to the gentle song of the water and felt his weariness begin to fade. He imagined how the stream, farther down the mountain, would merge into a rushing river and eventually become part of a vast ocean. "Thank you, Mouse," he said. "You're right. I'll keep moving forward, step by step, like the river. My dream is important, but I'll learn to enjoy the journey toward it. From that day on, Sherko stopped wearing himself out with worry. He worked hard, but also took time to cherish each day and every small victory. Life, like a river, guided him toward great discoveries and joys. Sherko and envy. When Sherko, the moonlit Pallas cat, was still young, he often watched the neighboring family living in a cozy valley near their home. These cats ate the tastiest treats, slept until noon, had a spacious house, and their fur gleamed from excellent care. Sherko couldn't hide his envy. It seemed to him that they had everything one could dream of. "Mom, why isn't our life like theirs?" he asked one day. "They eat the best food. Their house is big and beautiful. And sometimes I go to bed hungry. It's not fair." His mother smiled gently and sat Sherko down beside her. "My dear, sometimes what we see on the outside is nothing like what lies within," she began. "Do you think they're truly happy just because they have all those things?" Sherko nodded. His mother continued, "Yes, they do have a lot. But did you know that their father works almost all the time? He leaves early in the morning and returns when the children are already asleep. They eat plenty, but they often get sick because they overeat and hardly spend any time outdoors. Most importantly, this family lives in constant fear of losing what they have. Instead of enjoying life and sharing their abundance with others, they worry and hoard everything for themselves. Is that what you would call happiness?" Sherko thought about it. He remembered how his mom always found time for him and how they laughed even during difficult times. "But why do they have so much while we don't?" Sherko persisted. "Because the world isn't unfair," his mother replied. "It's about the choices we make. We could have more, even much more. But at what cost? Our choice is to share warmth and kindness, to spend time together. We work too, but our work doesn't consume all our energy or harm others, and it provides everything we need. That, to us, is far more valuable. If your heart is open and kind, you can warm not just yourself, but also those around you, especially in tough times." From that day, Sherko began to notice that happiness didn't depend on the number of possessions one had. He saw how his mother found joy in simple things: the scent of flowers, the song of the wind, and their modest but fresh and healthy meals, always made with love. Time passed, and Sherko grew up. He never forgot his mother's words and lived with an open heart, filling the world around him with warmth and kindness. He understood how difficult life could be for those who chose material things over connection and compassion. Sherko and the rat thief high in the mountains, where the clouds brushed against the earth, lived Sherko, the moonlit Pallas cat. That summer, he had built a small shelter among the rocks near the mountain's summit, and spent his days gathering medicinal herbs to sell in the nearby town to help his parents. His life was simple and full of hardships, often enduring hunger, sleeping on hard ground, and walking long distances to fetch water from a distant mountain stream. But Sherko never complained. He loved the ringing silence of the mountains, the scents of the herbs, and the cool moonlight that illuminated his nights. One evening, as he descended from the mountain peak, Sherko noticed movement inside his shelter. Approaching cautiously, he saw a thief, a large rat rummaging through his things, searching for something valuable. But in Sherko's humble shelter, there was little to find. Just bundles of herbs and a clay bowl. The rat turned to flee, but Sherko calmly spoke. "Wait, friend. You've climbed so high into the mountains. It must have been a difficult journey, and yet I have nothing of value to offer you. I own no gold, no fine clothes. I haven't even had time to gather the mountain herbs yet, and I must walk far to fetch water from the stream." Sherko smiled and looked up at the night sky, where a huge full moon hung over the mountain peaks. "But you know," he continued, "I can share with you the most beautiful thing I have. Look at that moon. She lights everything around us with her soft glow. Take her with you. Let her be my gift, and a reminder of this beautiful night." The rat stood in silence, stunned by Sherko's words. Finally, without a word, he left the shelter and began his descent into the valley. As he walked, the moonlight lit his path. Its glow was so warm and bright that the rat felt a strange peace settle within him. From that night on, the rat never stole again. He told everyone he met about the strange, silver-furred Pallas cat who had given him something priceless, the understanding of the world's beauty and generosity. As for Sherko, he stayed in the mountains, living his simple life and continuing to help his parents, finding joy in each new day. That summer, he gathered many fragrant medicinal herbs for the people of the valley. Sherko fell in love. High in the silvery mountains, where moonlight softens the night like velvet, lived young Sherko, the moonlit Pallas cat. He was at an age when the world felt vast and his heart unbearably fragile. And in this world, there was something, or someone, that made Sherko's heart beat faster. A young Pallas cat named Luna. She was smart, beautiful, and determined. Sherko tried to befriend Luna. He brought her the fluffiest tufts of grass, invited her to stargaze, and even shared his deepest secrets. But Luna was always busy, studying or chasing her dreams. "Sorry, Sherko," she would say. "I just don't have time for friendship right now." Sherko felt disheartened. He thought, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe she just doesn't care about me. He withdrew into himself, and his joy dimmed like a star hidden behind clouds. One day, Sherko's mother noticed her son staring sadly out the window. She sat beside him. "What's wrong, my dear moonlit kitten?" she asked gently. Sherko sighed deeply and shared his feelings. "I think Luna doesn't need me. She always says she has other things to do. Maybe there's something wrong with me." His mother wrapped him in a loving hug and said, "Ah, Sherko, you know Pallas cats aren't just slow on the outside. We're also slow to understand our hearts. Love is like a flower. It needs time to bloom. But that flower doesn't always blossom the way we hope. Sometimes it gives its petals to the wind, not to us. But how do I deal with this? Sherko asked. It hurts. You need to let Luna go, his mother said softly. That doesn't mean you're not good enough, or that she doesn't value you. Everyone has their own path. Right now, Luna has her own dreams and goals. If you truly care about her, give her the time and space she needs. Instead of worrying about whether she'll accept your friendship, live in a way that feels true to your heart. Be kind to her through your actions, but don't expect anything in return. Sherko thought for a moment. So, even if we never become friends, it's important for me to stay sincere, he asked. His mother nodded. That's right, my boy. Love isn't just about being together. It's about making the world brighter. Who knows? Maybe, over time, Luna will see you differently. Or maybe not. But what matters most is that you stay true, kind, and brave. Sherko felt his heart grow lighter. He realized that you couldn't force a flower to bloom before its time. From then on, he stopped feeling sad when Luna declined his invitations. Instead, he focused on living his life, helping others, and keeping a gentle hope in his heart. As time passed, Luna began to notice how kind and wise Sherko had become. And one day, under the bright glow of the moon, she approached him herself, ready to talk. But that is another story. Sherko and the Taste of Life. In the high mountains, where the night's silver light dances on shards of rock, lived Sherko, the moonlit palace's cat. He loved exploring slopes, hiding in the snow, and gazing at the stars. But one day, fate presented him with a difficult trial. One frosty evening, Sherko heard a terrifying roar. It was a mountain jaguar, a predator known for its speed and mercilessness, which had strayed into their peaceful region. The jaguar spotted Sherko and gave chase. Sherko ran with all his might, his paws barely touching the ground. The snow crunched beneath him, and the wind whistled in his ears. Sherko knew his only chance to survive was to find shelter. Ahead, he saw a tall tree with a sheer cliff behind it. Without hesitation, he leaped onto the trunk and scrambled up to the very top, clinging to the thinnest and most fragile branch. The jaguar halted at the base of the tree, growling in frustration. Unable to climb, it eventually turned and disappeared into the shadows. Sherko was left alone, perched high above the precipice. He sighed in relief, but quickly realized he was trapped. The branches trembled under his weight, threatening to snap at any moment, and the night wind howled around him. Then, he noticed something unusual. A single berry hanging on a delicate branch beside him. It shimmered in the moonlight, releasing a tantalizing aroma. Stretching carefully and risking a fall, Sherko managed to pluck the berry. He ate it, and its taste was extraordinary, sweet like honey and as fresh as morning snow. As the flavor filled him, Sherko felt an overwhelming sense of joy. Despite the danger, the thin branch, and the abyss below, he realized how beautiful every moment of life could be. With this thought, he noticed his fear fading. Even at the edge of a precipice, life could be savored to its fullest. The moonlight grew brighter, a full moon emerging from behind a towering peak, and the wind calmed. The branches of the tree, as if strengthened by his newfound peace, felt sturdier beneath him. Sherko carefully climbed down and, guided by his inner light, found his way home. He knew that night had changed him forever. From that day on, Sherko not only helped others, but also taught them to appreciate the moments of life, even when they seemed difficult or hopeless. After all, sometimes the sweetest berry grows on the edge of a precipice. Sherko and the lesson of gratitude. In the distant snow-covered mountains, where moonlight illuminates the impassable peaks, lived Sherko the Moon Manul. His heart, usually full of calm and joy, was heavy with sorrow this time. His best friend, an old raven named Karak, had left this world. Sherko felt an emptiness and didn't know how to cope with this feeling. Sherko went to visit his teacher, an old turtle named Sharon. Sharon's eyes glowed with a soft green light, as if reflecting the forest paths he protected. He lived in the heart of an ancient forest, in a giant oak tree considered the oldest in the area, at the very source of a river. Sharon had lived for centuries, watching the changing seasons and generations of forest creatures. He knew the laws of nature, forest legends, and secrets that were beyond the reach of most. He always wore a small acorn behind his ear, a symbol of his connection to the forest. When Sherko arrived, the teacher was already waiting for him, as if he had sensed the visit. "Teacher," began Sherko, "I feel so heavy. I can't stop thinking about Karak. Why did he leave? Why must everything eventually end?" Sharon looked at him with a gentle smile. "Dear Sherko, sit down. I will tell you a story. Once in the mountains, there was a fast-flowing river that filled the valleys with water and gave life to everything around. But one summer, it became so hot that the river dried up. The animals who drank from it began to long for it and asked the same question you ask. Why did it disappear?" Sherko listened intently as the wise turtle continued. "This old oak in which I live told them, everything that comes into our lives has a beginning and an end. We cannot hold the river forever, but we can be grateful for the water it gave us and the memories it left behind." Sharon looked at Sherko. "Do you understand, Sherko? Everything in this world is temporary. We have no power over this, but what we have experienced remains with us in the form of memories and lessons. Your friend Karak left much in your heart. Instead of mourning his departure, be thankful for the time you spent together. And now he has embarked on his farthest magical journey, just like that river which gave life to this valley and flowed into the endless sea." Sherko thought for a moment. He remembered how Karak accompanied him on nighttime walks, how he told stories and laughed with his croaky voice. These memories filled his heart not with sadness, but with warmth. "Thank you, teacher," said Sherko. "Now I understand. I will treasure these memories as the most valuable gift." From that day on, Sherko stopped suffering. Every time he looked at the moon, he remembered Karak with a smile, knowing that his friend would forever remain in his heart. And life went on, full of new encounters, lessons, and gratitude. Sherko and the Reflection. In a distant valley, At the foot of great mountains, where moonlight turned the night into magic, lived a small Pallas cat named Sherko. Each day, he would visit a forest pond to drink water. But every time he gazed at his reflection, he frowned. His fluffy cheeks, wide ears, and thick fur seemed clumsy and comical to him. Why am I not as slim as the squirrels, or as graceful as the foxes? Sherko thought, staring into the water. These thoughts made him sad, and he even began avoiding other animals, feeling unattractive. One evening, as the moon brightly lit the pond, an old carp swam up to him. Its scales shimmered like stars, and its voice was deep, like the waters of the pond itself. "What are you searching for in your reflection, little Pallas cat?" asked the carp. "I want to see myself as I dream to be. But every time I see this strange, clumsy, fluffy creature..." Sherko sighed. The carp paused for a moment and then said, "What you see is not always the truth. The water reflects not only your appearance, but also your thoughts about yourself. If you think you're unattractive, that is what the reflection will show." Sherko looked at the carp in surprise. "But isn't appearance important? Isn't it what makes us special? Isn't it why we're loved?" The carp smiled gently. "Appearance is only a temporary shell. True beauty lives within. Your kindness, courage, and heart. That is what stays with you always and only grows brighter over time. That is what others will truly love about you. Look at the moon. It's round, white, and simple. Yet its light comforts the forest, guides travelers, and makes the night magical. You see it as beautiful because you feel its meaning." Sherko thought deeply. He looked at the water again, but this time with a new perspective. In the reflection, he no longer saw a strange, fluffy Pallas cat, but himself, a small, kind, and curious creature of the forest, destined to grow into a strong and graceful animal. From that day on, Sherko stopped fearing his reflection. He learned to see not only the outer appearance, but also the inner qualities in himself and others. And the pond became his favorite place to reflect under the moonlight. Sherko and the flower high in the mountains, where the cold wind blows across the slopes and the moon shines the brightest, lived a small Pallas cat named Sherko. He was not only a resident of these harsh lands, but also a caring gardener. That summer, Sherko lovingly tended to a single yet extraordinary flower. Its petals shimmered in the moonlight, and it seemed like a part of the very sky itself. Every morning, Sherko watered the flower with mountain water from a distant stream, and in the evenings, he would talk to it, sharing his thoughts. The flower became his friend and part of his life. One dark, moonless night, the first autumn storm arrived in the mountains. The wind howled so fiercely that the trees bent to the ground. Sherko tried to shield the flower from the gusts, but his efforts were in vain. By morning, he saw that his beloved flower had been broken. Only the shattered stems and a few petals scattered by the wind remained. Sherko was deeply saddened. He felt as if he had lost something very important. Throughout the long winter, the Pallas cat pondered, often recalling the flower he had loved so much. But spring brought an unexpected surprise. As soon as the snow melted from the meadow, shoots began to appear around his home. Soon, the entire mountainside bloomed with the same moonlit flowers as the one he had grown. The meadow glowed under the moon, as if nature itself had decided to support Sherko. Sherko realized that while the storm had destroyed his favorite flower, it had helped the seeds spread, and his care for the flower had allowed the seeds to ripen and find new places to grow. Sherko smiled as he gazed at the blooming meadow and said, "What I loved and nurtured has now become a gift for the entire mountain." Sherko and words. High in the mountains, where the moonlight embraces the peaks and clouds often descend right to the doorstep, lived the palace's cat Sherko. His friend was the forest mouse, who often visited Sherko. Together they picked berries, watched the stars, and shared secrets. One day during a walk, Sherko, without meaning to, told the mouse that her pantry seemed too small for the winter. He said it in a friendly manner, with a smile, but his words hurt the mouse. Her ears drooped, and she said nothing in response. In the following days, the mouse began to avoid Sherko. She no longer came for tea, and their cheerful conversations stopped. Sherko was puzzled and upset. He didn't understand what had happened. He decided to ask the wise turtle named Karen, who slowly swam in the mountain stream. Karen had lived for centuries, watching the seasons change and the generations of forest inhabitants pass. He knew the laws of nature, ancient legends, and secrets that remained hidden from most. Sherko shared his trouble with him, and Karen listened with understanding. "Sherko, words have power," said Karen. "Even if you didn't mean to hurt the mouse, she might have perceived your words differently. It's easy to hurt a friend, but it's very difficult to fix that hurt. We all need time to accept the truth. Don't rush to criticize, even if it seems well-intentioned." Sherko pondered Charon's words. He realized that his comment could have upset the mouse because she was proud of her pantry and had dug it herself, spending a lot of time and effort on it. The next day at dawn, Sherko went to the mouse's burrow. He brought her a small gift, a handful of her favorite nuts. Knocking on the door, he said awkwardly, "Mouse, I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm so sorry if my words upset you. You are a wonderful housekeeper, and I really value our friendship." The mouse smiled and invited Sherko in. "Thank you, Sherko. Your words did hurt me, but I'm glad you apologized. It shows me that our communication matters to you." From that day on, their friendship grew even stronger. Sherko learned to be more careful with his words, and the mouse understood that friends sincerely care for her. And sometimes it's worth listening to them. By the end of the summer, she expanded her pantry. Sherko and the flood. At the foot of the high mountains, where the sky and earth merged in the misty light of the moon, lived a palace's cat named Sherko. His fur was silver, like the moonlight, and his eyes reflected the deep silence and wisdom of the night. Sherko was proud of his intellect and strength, and he always believed he could handle any difficulty alone. He lived in a village near a mountain stream, and every day he would go into the mountains to collect medicinal herbs to sell to the villagers. In early autumn, when the leaves on the trees began to fall, the first autumn rain came. It didn't stop the next day or the one after. The animals sat in their burrows and huts, preparing for winter. For the first time in Sherko's memory, the rain had been falling non-stop for a week, and the stream had turned into a powerful, muddy torrent. "Let's hope the stream doesn't overflow," thought Sherko before going to sleep. The next morning, when Sherko woke up, the usually calm stream had become a strong river, carrying small tree trunks. The water was rising, washing away paths and flooding the lowlands. All the animals became worried, and Sherko, seeing this, immediately decided to take action. "I'll handle this," he thought. "I can build a dam to divert the water away from the village." He got to work, gathering stones, dragging logs, but the water kept rising quickly. Sherko realized that the dam wouldn't be enough. He felt more and more tired and discouraged. He noticed that his friend, the fox cub, was watching him. "Sherko, what are you doing?" asked the fox. "Look, if we build a dam here, the water will flow away from the village, and our burrows won't be flooded," answered Sherko. "Great idea. We can help you," said the fox. "Together, we'll finish faster." Sherko had always managed on his own, but now he clearly needed help. The fox, quick and flexible, suggested gathering branches and vines to strengthen the dam. The bear cub, big and strong, suggested using large stones that Sherko couldn't lift to build a solid wall. And the owl, fast and wise, flew off to find and recruit more helpers. Sherko watched as the work came to life, and what seemed hopeless just a moment ago started to take shape. The agile fox effortlessly tied vines around large stones that the bear cub rolled over, while Sherko quickly sealed the gaps with clay, which he dug out with his sharp claws. The dam was growing before his eyes. Just in time, the owl arrived with new helpers, and she flew above the dam to point out a few weak spots that needed reinforcing to withstand the pressure of the water. When the dam was finished and the water began to flow away, leaving the animals' burrows safe, a tired Sherko stopped, looked at his terribly dirty paws and said, "This river is so powerful, and what makes it strong is the contribution of every little mountain stream and every raindrop. I never understood how great this force, our collective work, was. We too combined our small personal efforts for a single goal, and we managed to face such a force of nature. Together, each in their place, we create something much larger than we could have done alone." The moon quietly watched over the tired animals, happily chatting about how their homes and pantries were safe for the winter, and her light grew even brighter. That day, the villagers not only overcame the disaster, but also became much closer. And Sherko learned the most important truth. In harmony with friends, the world becomes brighter and calmer. Sherko and the Swan High in the Mountains. By a quiet little mountain lake, Sherko, the moonlit palace's cat, began a new chapter of his life. He married a wise and beautiful palace's cat named Luna, and moved to her homeland to help care for her elderly parents. But the first year of marriage was difficult for Sherko. Living together proved to be a tough challenge after his free, solitary life, with new rules, responsibilities, and tasks. He felt that he was losing his freedom and often went for walks alone to sort out his thoughts. One spring moonlit night, when everything around was bathed in silver light and the first flowers timidly opened their buds, Sherko descended to the lake. He heard a plaintive cry that broke the silence of the night. On the shore, he saw a magnificent white swan swimming on the small lake in apparent despair. "What happened?" asked Sherko. "I am searching for my wife," replied the swan, sadly lowering his head. "She disappeared many years ago, and I've been flying around the world trying to find her." Sherko offered his help. They searched all night, circled the entire lake, but found nothing. Tired and sad, Sherko returned home by dawn. Luna, noticing his pensive mood, asked what had happened. When he told her about the swan, Luna sighed deeply. "Many years ago, on a night just like this one, that swan's wife died. It was a dark, moonless night, and a jaguar caught her when they were resting by the lake after a long migration. All summer, we found her snow-white feathers on the shore. Since then, this mad swan comes every spring searching for her." Sherko turned away, holding back tears, and in a whisper, so as not to argue with his wife, he said, "He's not crazy. He's just living in a world where she is still alive, and where he still has hope." At dawn, Sherko saw the swan fly away with the first rays of the sun. Watching the graceful movement of his large white wings, Sherko realized how important it is to value those who are with us now, and how fragile and unpredictable life can be. He returned home, embraced Luna, and said, "I'm so happy that you're with me. I promise to try harder to appreciate our time together and be a good husband." From that day on, Sherko became more attentive and patient, and their home by the lake was filled with warmth and mutual understanding. Sometimes the hardest lessons come through the pain of others. Value your loved ones while they are near, and find joy in every day spent together. Sherko and the darkness high in the mountains, where the nights can become cold and dark even during hot summer days, and the stars shine brightly over the forest, lived a small Pallas cat named Sherko. He loved climbing trees, playing with his friends, and listening to stories from his mother. But Sherko had one fear. He was very afraid of the dark. When night fell over the forest and the moon hid behind the clouds, he could feel his heart beat faster. Every rustle seemed like a threat, and every shadow like a monster. One evening, Sherko was playing near his home with his friends, the hare and the hedgehog. They were happily rolling an acorn and discussing which berries in the forest were the tastiest. Without noticing, the sun sank behind the mountain, and suddenly, the hare noticed that the hedgehog had disappeared. "He must have gotten hungry from all our talking and went into the forest for berries," the hare said, worried. "But it's already so dark. What if he got lost?" Sherko felt fear freeze his pulse. The forest where the hedgehog had gone was particularly dense, and the recent rumors about a dangerous mountain jaguar spotted in their quiet area made the situation even more concerning. I'm afraid of the dark," Sherko admitted, lowering his ears. But the hare, trembling, said, "Someone has to find him. We can't leave our friend alone in the dark forest." Sherko looked up at the night sky. The moon peeked out from behind the clouds, as if encouraging him. He took a deep breath and said, "I'll go. I have to find the hedgehog." Sherko entered the dense forest. Moonlight filtered through the thick branches, casting strange and whimsical shadows. Every sound made him look around anxiously. The rustling of leaves, the crack of a branch under his paws. He remembered how his mother had taught him to listen, not just with his ears, but with his heart. Gradually, Sherko began to distinguish distant sounds. He heard an owl hooting on a distant tree, the rustling of little beetles in the grass. This helped him focus. He sniffed the air, trying to catch the scent of the hedgehog. And suddenly, amid all the forest aromas, he caught the familiar smell of berries that the hedgehog loved. Sherko followed the sweet scent and soon heard a faint squeak. He quickened his pace, weaving through thorny bushes until he saw his friend. The hedgehog was stuck between the roots of a tree, trying to reach the ripest berries. "Sherko, you came!" the hedgehog exclaimed. "Of course I came," Sherko replied, pulling him free from the trap. The hedgehog was shaking from fear and cold, but he was unharmed. Together, they hurried back to the cave. Now, Sherko was no longer scared of the dark shadows and strange sounds of the forest. He only thought about how his friend was right beside him and how they needed to get home quickly. When they reached their home, Sherko's mother greeted them with warm embraces. "You were brave, my little fluff," she said. "But what about your fear of the dark?" Sherko thought for a moment before answering. "I realized that my fear wasn't about the darkness itself, but about the unknown and the thought that I would have to rely only on myself when no one else is around. After all, you've always been there for me, Mum." From that day on, Sherko no longer hid in a corner when night came. He began to listen more attentively to the sounds of the forest and trusted his abilities more. His fear of the dark gradually faded because Sherko understood. He could be brave even when he was afraid. Sometimes fear is just inexperience or a habit. By overcoming it for others, we discover a strength within ourselves that we didn't even know we had. Sherko knows best. In a wonderful mountain forest, where snow can fall even in summer, and the moon casts a silver glow on the snow-covered peaks of the high mountains, lived a small Pallas cat named Sherko. He was curious and brave, but he had one particular trait. He always believed that he knew best. Sometimes it was difficult for him to hear the opinions of others because he was sure that only his own perspective was correct. In the forest where Sherko lived, there were many different animals. They all lived in harmony, helping each other, and each had their own opinion. Sherko often argued with his friends, insisting that his approach was always the right one. He argued with the hare, the owl, the hedgehog, and even with the tiniest squirrels. He was certain that he was always right, and didn't like it when anyone expressed an opinion that didn't match his own. One day, in the farthest corner of the forest, Sherko discovered a strange flower. It was bright blue with golden petals and emitted a soft glow. Sherko had never seen such an unusual plant, but he didn't know how to use it. He hurried to his friends to find out what kind of flower it was. The first friend he met was the hare. Hare, look at this beautiful flower, said Sherko. I'm sure it can be used to treat wounds because it's so bright and unusual. The hare carefully examined the flower and replied, I've never seen such a flower, Sherko, and often bright colors warn of danger. Bees are also bright, and their stings hurt. We should be careful. But Sherko disagreed. No, hare, you're just scared. I'm sure it's helpful. I'll make a decoction from it, and it will make me very strong. The hare tried to convince him again, but Sherko wouldn't listen. He was convinced that he knew better. Next, he went to the owl, who often helped others by teaching them the wisdom of the forest. Owl, look at this flower, said Sherko. I think it should be picked and made into a potion. You're smart. Can you tell me how to do it? The owl carefully looked at the flower and said, Sherko, I understand your desire to use it, but I would advise you to study its properties first and try a very small piece. Maybe you're wrong, and the flower isn't as harmless as it seems at first glance. I've never seen such a flower before. It seems to have come from a neighboring valley. But Sherko was stubborn and again didn't want to listen. You're just too cautious, Owl. I know what I'm doing, he replied, shaking his head, and went on his way. Sherko decided to investigate the properties of the flower on his own. He decided to make a decoction to see how it would affect him. For about an hour, he simmered the brew, stirring it occasionally. But as soon as he tasted the bitter decoction, his head began to spin, and he felt a strange sensation in his stomach. He felt weak and in pain. Soon he realized that he had made a mistake and couldn't even lift his paw. His throat was dry, and his head was spinning terribly. Oh no! I was so sure that I knew better than anyone, and now I feel so bad, whispered Sherko. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice. It was the owl, and behind her was the hare. We thought you would do it your way anyway, so we decided to stay close and offer help if needed, said the owl. The hare approached Sherko and said, We told you to be careful. Sometimes you need to listen to others to avoid mistakes. We only wanted the best for you. Sherko understood that his friends had been trying to help him, but he hadn't listened to them. He felt ashamed of his stubbornness, but also grateful that his friends hadn't abandoned him. Forgive me, said Sherko. I was too sure that I was always right. It's very important to consider the opinions of others and not be afraid to change your decisions. The owl smiled. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes, Sherko, but the important thing is to learn from them. Now, you know that sometimes you need to stop and listen to those around you. Each of us has our own unique life experience and perspective, and often, when we combine our knowledge, we find the best solutions. The hare added, We all learn from each other. Sherko felt his heart fill with warmth. He realized that true growth comes when you open up to the opinions of others and are willing to learn. Now he understood that it's not just important to speak, but to listen attentively as well. His friends gave Sherko a lot of water with sour lemon to help dissolve the poison from the flower and help him recover. From that day on, Sherko became more attentive and tolerant of others' opinions. He learned to value the perspectives of his friends and understood how much one can learn simply by listening carefully to others. and the forest became not only a place of adventures for him, but also a place where every day could bring new lessons in wisdom. His friends were always there, ready to support him at the right moment. Sherko and the Chick. In a beautiful mountain forest, where even summer sometimes brings snow from the mountain peaks and moonlight illuminates the snowy summits with silver, lived a small Pallas cat named Sherko. On a warm, sunny day, Sherko was walking with his best friends, Hare and Hedgehog, at the edge of the forest. They wandered through the summer-scented grasses, discussing what treat would be best for a birthday picnic. Hedgehog was sure that berries were the way to go. Hare insisted on carrots, and Sherko suggested adding fresh fish from the stream. Amid the summer sounds of the forest, with the buzzing of bees and the rhythmic chirping of cicadas, a faint, plaintive squeak suddenly pierced the air. The sound was barely noticeable, but Sherko, with his keen hearing, immediately became alert. "Did you hear that?" he asked, listening carefully. "It seems to be from there," said Hare, pointing to a tall tree with spreading branches. They approached and saw that a tiny chick had gotten stuck on one of the thin upper branches. It had accidentally fallen out of its nest and could crash to the ground. Its yellow fluffy wings were trembling with fear, and its beak opened in a mournful cry. "Oh no! It can't get out on its own," exclaimed Hare. "It needs help immediately," added Hedgehog. Sherko looked up. Of all of them, he was the only one who could climb well. The tree was very tall, and the branches near the top were thin and fragile. While Pallas cats are great at balancing, Sherko was also afraid of heights. His paws shook at the very thought of climbing so high. I'm not sure I can do it," he muttered, lowering his ears. "But you're the most agile of us," encouraged Hare. "And you have the softest, gentlest paws when you retract your claws. If you carry the chick, it will be safe," added Hedgehog. Sherko took a deep breath. He felt ashamed for thinking about his fear when someone needed help. "Okay, I'll try," he said, looking at his friends. "But if something goes wrong, catch me below." He began to climb the tree. The first branches were strong, and Sherko moved confidently. But the higher he climbed, the more the branches swayed. The bark creaked under his paws, and Sherko's heart beat so loudly that it seemed it could be heard even from the ground. "You're almost there," called Hare from below. Sherko glanced down, and a wave of fear washed over him. The ground seemed far away, and he felt tiny and helpless. The thought flashed through his mind. What if I fall? What if I can't do it? But then he heard the squeak again. The chick was desperately calling for help, each second risking a fall. Sherko remembered why he was there and focused. Carefully moving and balancing with his tail, he inched closer to the chick. "Everything's okay, little one," whispered Sherko. "I'll help you." His paws gently picked up the chick, which fell silent as if it understood that it was safe now. Sherko slowly and carefully began to descend, trying not to break the thin branches under him. Halfway down, one of the branches cracked loudly, and Sherko froze, gripping tightly with his claws. "You're doing great, Sherko," encouraged Hare from below. Summoning his courage and calming his breath, Sherko continued the descent. When he finally leapt to the ground, his friends greeted him with joyful exclamations. Sherko carefully placed the chick on the grass and then looked up, where the empty nest was visible on another branch. "We need to take it back," he said, realizing that his work wasn't done yet. More confidently, Sherko climbed the tree again and carefully placed the chick back into its nest. In that moment, he felt not just brave, but capable of more. When Sherko returned to the ground, Hare and Hedgehog embraced him. "You're a hero, Sherko," said Hare. "You know, I've realized something," said Sherko thoughtfully, gazing at the top of the tree. "I wasn't afraid of the height. I was afraid that I wouldn't have the strength or confidence. But now I know. The most important thing is to believe in yourself. And in friends who are always there," added Hedgehog. From that day on, Sherko not only stopped being afraid of heights, but also became more confident in his abilities. The chick, now a grown bird, often returned to the tree to greet its savior. The Tale of Sherko and the Snowy Trap. In the heart of the high mountains, where the peaks are covered by eternal snow and the moonlight turns the icy slopes into a glittering sea, lived a little Marnal named Sherko. His home was a dense pine forest, where he felt like the master. He knew every trail, every tree, and of course, he considered himself the most agile and clever creature in the area. But there was another resident of these mountains with whom Sherko didn't get along. It was a fox cub named Rix. The little fox was fast, sly, and often boasted to Sherko about his agility. Arguments often arose between them. Who caught fish better in the mountain river? Who could run faster on the snow-covered trails? Who was stronger and better? It got to the point where they just snorted when someone mentioned their rival in front of them. And when they accidentally met, they turned away as if they didn't know each other. At the very beginning of spring, Sherko went to gather last year's berries in a distant meadow. And, as often happens in the mountains, a snowstorm suddenly broke out. A heavy cloud descended on the mountain, and the wind howled so loudly that it seemed as if the mountains themselves were singing their ancient song. Snow fell in large, heavy flakes for more than a day. When the storm calmed down, the forest was shrouded in a thick white mist. Sherko calmly spent the night in an abandoned hollow among the roots of a large oak tree. Peering out from the hollow, he saw that the snow had piled up to twice his height. Sherko snacked on some dried berries, and he felt a strong thirst. The stream wasn't too far, and from there he could follow it down to his home. Taking the first step into the deep snow, he realized it would be a very hard task. The Manor sank into the heavy, damp snow, almost to the ground with each step. Very soon he was exhausted, gasping for breath. Looking back at the path he had traveled, he realized he was trapped. The road, which on a good day would take only a few minutes, could now delay him for several days. He simply wouldn't have the strength to overcome this snow barrier. Sherko sadly lowered his tired paws. The dense mist sometimes thickened, hiding important landmarks, confusing and muffling the distant sound of the stream. Night would soon fall, and he wouldn't even know which direction to go. The thought of this gave him strength, and Sherko began to climb the snow again, which sank under his weight. Once again raising his head above the snow surface, he noticed something strange. Just ahead, something flashed. Sherko squinted, trying to keep his head above the snow. And indeed, not far away, some creature was also in trouble. Trying to get attention, the man shouted, "Hey! Hey!" The dense fog muffled all sounds in the forest, but he was heard. A familiar reddish face appeared above the snow on the other side. It was Rick's. Sherko would have given anything for it not to be him. For several minutes, they simply stared at each other in silence, catching their breath. Sherko broke the silence. "What are you doing here?" he asked. It was clear that the little fox didn't want to answer, but he eventually said, "I was collecting wood mushrooms for home." Who knew there would be such a snowstorm? Old grudges suddenly surged up, and Sherko turned away, feeling irritated. Calming down a little, he looked back at the fox. Sherko saw how heavily Riggs sighed and how difficult the path was for him. He saw a tired, still fragile creature who, like him, had gotten trapped in the snow. And if a snow leopard found them by nightfall, they would be very easy prey. Sherko took a deep breath. A thought he had been trying not to acknowledge began to form in his mind. "Rix," Sherko said slowly, almost with effort. "Let's dig together." The fox hesitated, but apparently realizing the hopelessness of the situation, quietly replied, "Okay." Together things went more smoothly. Taking turns to break the snow, they managed to rest and make progress. A sense of excitement and confidence in the outcome began to grow. The despair Sherko had felt while fighting the elements alone disappeared. Before dusk, they had cleared a path to the stream and drank eagerly. Now, getting home was going to be an easy task. The snow along the stream had melted, and in some places, they could run through shallow water. From that day on, Sherko and Rix became true friends. They realized that together, they could achieve more than alone. And their arguments about who was better turned into jokes that only strengthened their friendship.